The man with 4 European trophies, Unai Emery, leads Aston Villa back in the big time. And there's going to be a lot of emotion attached. There's going to be a lot of Villa fans dreaming of something huge because in reality, are they going to win the Premier League? Who knows? But in Europe, with Unai Emery at the helm, I do look at Villa and go, they could be a problem for teams because they've got a manager who's won it so many times.
Yeah, and I think you look at their initial 8 fixtures, they're not the hardest, are they? They've got young boys, Bayern Munich, obviously a difficult fixture. Bologna have lost all their players, Club Brugge, Juventus, Leipzig, Monaco and Celtic. You'd say probably 5 or 6 of those are very, very winnable for Aston Villa. The other 2... take it or leave it, we don't know what happens on the night. But as you mentioned, they've got a manager there who has incredible European pedigree. It might not be in the Champions League, but 4 Europa League titles with 2 different teams is something that you can't sniff at all. And Villa have started this season exactly the way that they finished last season. I think they've managed incredibly well. Every player knows his role. They've got backup for when, like Watkins, for example, who we all thought last year maybe he gets used a little bit too much. Now they've got Duran who's scoring goals and looks absolutely electric. And I don't see why this Villa side couldn't go far in a cup competition, particularly with the tactical nous that Unai Emery has. I don't see why he wouldn't be able to relate that over to the Champions League. And I think they've got the players and they've got the manager to do it. Am I saying that they're going to go all the way? Probably not. But I think they'll have a pretty good European tour.
What I think is really interesting about this is that obviously people will say he's only ever done well in the Champions League once where Villarreal got to the semi-final. But I think this is more like the Europa League than the Champions League could ever be. Because they're playing young boys, Monaco, Celtic, Club Brugge, Bologna. These are Europa League teams.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, if they get the right sort of draw, things work out quite well, Villa could potentially have like a Europa League type run to the quarters and the semis. And in one-off games, I don't think there's many better managers in the Champions League.
Well, it's interesting with Unai Emery because not necessarily great when it comes to group stages. There's a reason why they won 3 Europa League titles in a row. They win when you win the Europa League, qualify for Champions League, but they kept on going out of the Champions League group. And so group stages not being necessarily his forte. It's when it gets to knockout stages and it's a 2-legged competition is when he really makes his money. I think Villa will have to make a business decision at some point this year in terms of going for the league or not going for the league in terms of winning the title, but finishing in the top 4 or going for a cup competition. Because I think that's the next evolution of Aston Villa. I think that Newcastle, when you saw them finish in the top 4, following season went on some incredible European away trips, but didn't get out of their group, finished bottom of their group, didn't quite qualify for the Europa League. I think if you ask a Newcastle fan then, what do you want in the following season? It'd probably be a trophy. And I think that's what Villa not need to follow up with following last year finishing in the top 4, but I think that would be the natural progression because I think it's going to be very competitive to finish in the top 4 this season. They're going to have a lot of games. We've already seen Ollie Watkins not look like a player he looked like last season. Again, it's only 3 games in. But John Duran, like you mentioned, has scored a couple of goals for them already this season and looks like he's on fire. Seems he's got his stuff sorted out. And so I think Villa will have to make a decision when it gets to about November, December time in terms of the competition they're going to prioritise because I don't think they can challenge on all 4 fronts if they do stay in the FA Cup and the League Cup as well.
It's interesting because I think you can't win. Not every team can win something, right? And I don't agree with that. I don't think that progression for Villa would necessarily be winning a trophy. I don't even know if it would be staying in the top 4. I think where they've come from in such a short space of time, that just being in and around those areas. I think if Villa finished 6th, but finish in the top 8 in the Champions League group stages, this new Champions League group stages, that's a huge success. It was only like 3 or 4 years ago that they were watching them against Coventry in the Championship. So I don't necessarily think that they need to win anything. I don't even necessarily think that they need to make a decision. I think it's fine for them to for them to try in both as hard as they possibly can and fall short in both. And I still think that it's been a success where they've come from. I think the Emery factor makes this a lot more exciting than it could be. It might be the Europa League, but I always think, and I've always said, and I've said on here many times, that certain players and certain managers are more adept to cup competitions and certain players and certain managers are more adept to the league. Unai Emery is obviously more adept to cup competitions despite the fact that he's done incredibly well in the league. He has a team there with, as I was talking about when we were discussing Liverpool, he has players there who can produce a lot of these amazing moments. We saw Ollie Watkins do it in the Euros. Leon Bailey, we've seen Duran do it in the last minute last season. He started this season exactly the same. So I think they've got like a really good recipe. And I think if as long as they can just kind of stick to their principles and Unai Emery sticks to their principles, I think they can go far. And I don't think that necessarily needs to come at the cost of the league.
See, the reason why I say they need to make a decision is I'm just going off past history, and I look at Newcastle, for example. They didn't make a decision, and last season they were absolutely decimated with injuries. They had injuries left, right, and centre, and struggled to compete in the league. And now we're talking about Newcastle sides that are in a completely different position, and the perspective on them is completely different. And people are talking about Eddie Howe maybe being one of the first managers to lose his job, even though they're unbeaten in the first 3 games this season. And so things can change very quickly. And like you say, Unai Emery's traded on winning trophies, and if he continues to win trophies, his stock only goes that way, and Villa fans are satiated. I think if Aston Villa try and compete in all competitions, end up finishing 6th or 7th in the league, and don't get out of the Champions League group, and it becomes a bit of a dud of the season, then I think you don't start to ask questions because he's done such a good job. But I think the shine comes off Aston Villa as opposed to winning the trophy, and then it continues. Even if you finish 8th in the league but you win a trophy, we've seen Ten Hag talk about winning the trophy despite the fact that his team performed poorly in the league. I think that because like you mentioned, there are so few trophies to compete for. If Villa manage to get their hands on one of them, a Carabao Cup, an FA Cup, or I'm not going to say Champions League or Premier League, then it will be a great season for them.
But the thing is, the Champions League is so unrealistic for them. We can big them up and we can big up their manager. There are much better teams in this competition. It's very unrealistic for them to win the trophy anyway. And would an Aston Villa fan, do you think, be more satisfied with finishing 5th, not getting out of the group, but winning a Carabao Cup? I don't think so.
Yeah, I think they would.
Really? Do you place that much importance on trophies, especially those lower trophies?
I think it depends on the team and the situation. So, like, for Man City to have a similar situation like that, like, you're desensitized almost to winning them unless they're the big ones. But for a club like Villa, who haven't touched a trophy in as many years as they have brought Emery in so that they can get back on the big chart, if you like. And for them, a Carabao Cup or an FA Cup is invaluable. Because I think for Newcastle, and this is where I come to the other point I was going to make, is emotional tax took over last year.
Yeah.
Like, they were going helter-skelter against PSG, and then on the weekend drawing 1-1. And by Tuesday, they were shattered. Yeah. And you could tell they were shattered. And Villa, I don't think will approach Champions League with the same vigour. I think Newcastle actually believed they could do crazy things when actually they were never going to touch
the group of
Champions
death as well.
Yeah, exactly. And because it started well, I think they thought that could have happened.
Yeah.
And so I think for them, then the FA Cup went away, the Carabao Cup went away, because they were like, we're going to do something here. End up finish bottom of the group.
The weird thing with Villa, and maybe I've got a slightly different perspective as it is, I don't see this as like an underdog team who are doing well. I just think that
Barclays men has got to your head.
No. I think they were where they shouldn't have been in the Champions League, and I don't know why, but I just look at this side now and I think, okay, that is a side, that is a manager who should be competing to try and finish in the top 4, should be competing for major trophies. So if I was a Villa fan, and I'd be genuinely interested to hear what Villa fans say, I don't think I'd be happy with the Carabao Cup rather than a good run here and maybe even like a 5th or 6th place finish.